Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this panel. It's been illuminating about how this is work. This program has worked all across the country. But I want to direct my question primarily back to Pat Ford because he and I have had these conversations, and we debated it back then, which was the fact that someone mentioned again there are 450,000 brownfield sites across America. 450,000 sites, and funding level prior to this infusion of the infrastructure was only about a thousand sites a year we were able to clean up. So anyone can do the math. It doesn't take an engineer to do that, but you can figure out we're talking hundreds of years before we'd ever get these sites cleaned up with it. So with the improvements we made, and I think Mr. Ford, you participated with us. You gave us counsel, your insight into how we crafted that 2018 bill. So it made significant improvements with it. And we're seeing some uptick, but there's still not enough funds for it. So I applaud the fact that the infrastructure bill put this $1.5 billion more into this program. And as a result of that, but that leads to this question essentially is that we've got to be able to sustain this. Otherwise, we're going to drop back to the 2018 levels after 5 years of this. So my question is, I've got some conditions with this. One is we want to make sure this remains a public-private partnership. We don't want, as the chairman, the ranking chairman said, we don't want this to be a government bailout. So what are ways that we might be able to sustain this increased level of funding at the $1.5 billion, or we're going to on these individual grants from $500, $500,000 to $5 million? What are some things that we might do? Could a revolving fund, could that work? And the second question, so because both of them, Mr. Ford, directed to you, back a follow-up question or comment to what the chairman just raised, or what would you recommend in this next program? You were instrumental. Your fingerprints are all over the 2018 legislation. So what would you recommend? So those two things, how can we sustain this level of funding? And secondly, what can we improve?
There's two changes that I would like to see the committee consider. The first is that you inched the eligibility criteria into the private sector by allowing private not-for-profits be eligible to access this money for assessments and cleanup. I think it would be fantastic if you could actually take it one step further, provided that a private for-profit applicant could illustrate threshold criteria to allow private for-profits to get this money directly. There are state programs throughout the United States that actually have their own brownfields programs that actually grant money to private entities. I would like to see the committee do that, particularly in light of the fact that we've illustrated and can illustrate that we have the ability to leverage those government dollars into private investment and job creation. The second thing is a nuance of the actual EPA programs themselves under the category of the EPA operating at the pace of business. The TBA program, the Targeted Brownfields Assistance Program, is a fast, easy, flexible program that small communities with economic development agencies with a staff of one, or large economic development agencies like we have in Buffalo, New York, can access. And what's great about the TBA is it's a rolling program, a rolling fund, rolling deadlines, meaning that as long as it is funded, anytime throughout the year, you reach out to a program manager, you fill out a questionnaire, you submit it, and you can access technical services funded by the EPA to get an assessment immediately. It would be
those, if I could interrupt, we can't claim my time just for a second on it, and that is you're talking about how we can improve it, but I got notes on those. But what about how do we sustain the funding level at this level? Or is there some way that through a revolving fund, or how can we maintain it? Because otherwise, we're going to drop back to the 2018 levels again.
I think a revolving loan fund would be something worth considering. I think if you could mirror something like a payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot program whereby which the investments that are made into a brownfield site, if a percentage of that could be rolled back into a fund, similar to a pilot program on other sites that are established in communities, the found money, the found investments that are occurring in these brownfield sites could then be used to replenish funding and grow that funding. And again, if you just look at the records of the record numbers of investment in some of the brownfields we've done, I think that that would be a fantastic opportunity to replenish some of these funds for continued use for assess and cleanup.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I yield back.